Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Leon Smith, the Executive Director at Citizens for Juvenile Justice, and it's my pleasure to welcome you all to this release event for our latest issue brief, Inequitable Outcomes, Severe Consequences, Rethinking the Youthful Offender Statute in Massachusetts. We released this report because, given the data you're going to hear today, the time is right to revisit this law, which is a holdover of the tough on crime era and the super predators panic of the 1990s. This is a statute that opens up adult penalties for young people charged with certain offenses. And while there are not a large number of YO cases each year, the way the law operates in practice has real, negative, and disproportionate outcomes for young people in Massachusetts. This leads to the most severe sentences available within juvenile jurisdiction being disproportionately, or in some cases almost exclusively, being imposed on our young people of color. We chose the cover for this report because it reflects this reality, as young people of color are not only subjected to harsh rhetoric calling for criminalization and punishment, but they receive it under the statute in the most impactful and life-changing of ways. In addition to hearing from CfJJ today, we're also going to delve into the human impact of these decisions, hearing from someone who was charged as a youthful offender and from an attorney who represents young people on these cases. The last thing I'll mention very quickly is that the report is now live on CfJJ's website, so please feel free to go to cfjj.org/publications. And with that, I'll introduce Joshua Dankoff, CfJJ's Director of Strategic Initiatives, who will share the findings of the report. Josh?
Thanks so much, Leon, and thank you everyone for taking the time today to join us on this report release. Just pull this up. Great. So as Leon mentioned, today we are launching this report, Inequitable Outcomes, Severe Consequences, Rethinking the Youthful Offender Statute in Massachusetts. It's my plan today to give a very brief background on the Youthful Offender, or YO statute, give some of the findings and recommendations, and relatively quickly pass it over to our two guests today who have more experience specifically with the statute in different ways. There should be some time at the end for questions and answers. You should feel free to drop questions in the chat, which we will probably just address towards the end. But thank you so much for joining. If you don't know about CfJJ, we are almost 30 years old this year, and our mission is to advocate for statewide systemic reform that achieves equitable youth justice. Our work includes advocacy, research, public education, and community engagement. And this, as you'll see in the findings today, the word equitable is really at the fore when it comes to youthful offender statute and the way that it plays out in Massachusetts. So very briefly, youthful offender, this term, is a legal term of art in Massachusetts that only represent a small proportion of young people really at the intersection of juvenile and adult legal systems. This term, youthful offender, was created in 1996 with this statute that creates this separate category within the juvenile legal system for young people who are can be subject to both a juvenile sentence or an adult sentence. So juvenile sentence up to age 21, or a partial or full adult sentence, or both. And that is sort of the unique piece of this law, and why it's so important for us at Citizens for Juvenile Justice to pay attention to and really put a spotlight on the way that this law plays out in practice. So a youthful offender, just by way of definition, is a young person between ages of 14 and 18, so under 18, who is indicted by a grand jury for committing a felony and has at least one of the following as a precedent: either a previous DYS commitment, that they'd committed a certain listed firearm offenses, or that they committed an offense involving the infliction or threat of serious harm. So quickly to the findings. First off, the number of youthful offenders, as I said, represent a very small proportion of the juvenile court's workload. So while youthful, and the chart you see here shows that the 10-year history of the numbers, it's hovered around 100 per year. And while that number increased after 2013, 2014, right when 17-year-olds joined the juvenile court, the number has stayed pretty steady, returning to pre-2013 numbers, in the last 5 years. There's a slight increase in number in YO charges in the last year, but overall, it's important to say when there are media narratives or narratives that talk about this huge increase in youth crime, just to note that there is not a huge increase in the number of youthful offenders charged. But there is really uneven application of the youthful offender of youthful offenders and unequal charging of youthful offenders between counties. So what you're looking at here in this chart is the blue line. It shows the number of YOs. This is from fiscal year 2023. The number of YOs charged by county, and not all counties even had any charge, so not all of the counties are listed here. And you'll see much higher numbers in Middlesex and especially Essex and Suffolk and Berkshire. And especially to note, the orange is the rate of YOs charged per 10,000 residents. So the higher that orange line is, that's the higher the charging rate is per capita by population. And what you would expect to see, moving from left to right, these are the highest number, the highest population counties on the left and the lower population counties on the right. If the YO charging was even across the state, would be the blue line also trending the highest on the left and then trending to the right, but that is not what you see. The second main finding, and we're going to talk in some detail about this, is that Black and Latina youth make up a disproportionate number of youth subjected to YO indictments. So on the left-hand side, we have the overall Massachusetts population of 14 to 17-year-olds, which you'll see is 65% white, 18% Hispanic, and 10% Black or African-American. But when on the right, you see YO filings that while in the overall population, only 28% of youth are Black or Latine, over 77% of all YO filings are of Black and Latina youth. So a very large disproportionate racial charging that we see in the state that is really concerning for us. This is the same when we break this down by county. And just to note, all of this data is public-facing data from the trial court and from the juvenile court. So this is actually a screenshot of the dashboard on from the trial court. But when you look at these numbers, you see that, again, the red and the orange are Black and Hispanic youth, and Black and Hispanic children. And they're making up the majority, and in some cases, all of the YOs charged in a county in FY 2023. Similarly, this trend tracks over time. We just highlighted 4 of the counties here, but we see in Suffolk County and Essex County and Middlesex and Plymouth that the disproportionate rates have persisted since 2018 and continue to this day. One thing we want to just point out is there's a slight difference. While white youth are charged as YOs almost exclusively for person offenses, so crimes against a person, the Black and Latina youth are charged much more with weapons offenses, and that includes weapons offenses. That includes the weapons offense of carrying, which can make someone carrying a firearm, which can make someone subject to a youthful offender charge. And it's just really noteworthy and concerning that almost no white youth are charged for weapons offenses, and a much higher proportion of youth of color are charged under those offenses. Okay, and our final overall finding is that judges have a really high degree of discretion in sentencing for youthful offenders, for youth adjudicated as youthful offenders. And what that looks like in practice is that some youth that are charged under the YO statute receive sentences from juvenile court judges that are longer and more severe than similarly charged adults. So in this case, similarly charged 18 or 18 to 20-year-olds would probably receive in Superior Court. And that this is especially the case in Essex and Bristol counties. And what we've seen from both the data and from talking to a number of people is that especially in Essex and Bristol County, it looks like there's this alignment between DAs and DA practices and policies that really push YO charging and longer sentences and recommendations for longer sentences with judges in those counties, juvenile court judges in those counties who are accepting those recommendations. And we see that both in the case of really long adult sentences, right? The YO statute allows under the statute for an adult sentence up to the maximum that would be received in adult court. We also see that for combined juvenile adult sentences where someone will be adjudicated and given a sentence to DYS commitment up to 21 plus an adult sentence, as well as suspended sentences in adult court and really lengthy adult probation time, which can be really challenging for young people coming out of DYS or coming out of the House of Corrections or DOC to not get violated and pulled back into the system. And our concern here is that the YO statute as applied is not in line with the intentions of the juvenile court, right? These sentencing practices, especially that if the juvenile court is meant for rehabilitative practice and to treat young people, treat children in a parens patriae manner, in the same way that one would want to treat their own children, that is not the case we're seeing with these really lengthy sentencing practices. So again, the takeaway here is that the prosecutorial policy and practices really matter. And the result is that the culture of courts and the outcome for young people differ significantly across the state. And we really see that the racial dynamics of that hit hardest against Black and Latina youth. Very specifically, Black and Latina youth appear to do receive harsher sentences when compared to white youth. So in fiscal year 2023, almost half of those who were adjudicated to be a YO, either found guilty or adjudicated delinquent based on a YO charge, received either a combination sentence or an adult sentence. But 87.5% of those youth who received either a combination or adult sentence were Black or Latina. And of those who just received an adult sentence, 96%, 24 out of the 25 youth who received an adult sentence were Black or Latina. And this is one of those things where you've got to wonder what is going on here, right? What do we actually have one justice system or do we have two justice systems? If this is a practice and this is a law that's only being applied or vast majority only being applied in the harshest ways against Black and Latina youth, we've really got to question what's going on here. And lead us to ask, and part of the report has a section sort of that looks at what is driving the racial disparities in YO cases, right? And we look at three things. And not to suggest that these are the only things, but we look at three and have an analysis of three in the report. First is just that disproportionate minority contact for Black and Latinx youth in the juvenile legal system really applies in these weapons offenses. And we saw that in an earlier slide, that in fiscal year 2023, youth of color were more likely than white youth to have delinquency complaints initiated through an arrest. And these earlier system contacts can lead to young people having a DYS commitment that then later on can be the predicate or the prerequisite for being charged as a YO. Secondly, we see that the decision to divert or to either divert or to issue a delinquency filing that can end up as a YO is determined at the discretion of the court, either at the court or the prosecutor, and that there's currently lacking statewide guidelines, although we do recognize there's some expansion of diversion. So there are some counties that claim to do some diversion for weapon carrying, but that is not something that's universal, and certainly that is a difference in DA practice. And finally, as I said before, the imbalance of youthful offender cases against Black and Latine youth is at least in part a result of these high arrest rates earlier in the system and higher delinquency adjudications that advance youth of color through the juvenile legal system. And this data is not, this data that's presented here is not about YOs, but is showing first-time DYS commitments by race and ethnicity. And just to use 2023 as an example, you'll see that though this is not the makeup of the state of Massachusetts, you have both Black and Hispanic Latinx youth having higher first-time commitments to DYS than white youth. And again, that's the predicate, or that's the one of the prerequisites for being later charged as a YO, right? So YO is this we're seeing these really high levels of racial disparities in the YO, in part because we're seeing really high levels of racial disparities earlier on. All right. We have some recommendations in this report. And the first is a series of recommendations towards the state legislature to think about the fact that and recognize that the YO statute is a remnant of the ineffective tough on crime policies of the 1990s, and to reevaluate the YO statute in light of ongoing juvenile legal system reform and our understanding of young people now. And we have three specific recommendations here that I want to just note. One is to limit prior DYS commitment. One of the criteria for DYS commitment to only commitments for felonies, and to exclude an earlier DYS commitment for a misdemeanor as being a predicate or prerequisite for a later YO charge. Second is to exclude YO charges for the carrying of a firearm outside of home or business, MGL 269-10A, and to limit YO charges to offenses only when a firearm is actually used in furtherance of a crime. Right, this carrying of a firearm should not be, in our opinion, and we hope the legislature takes this up, the basis for a YO charge. And finally, to raise the lower age of YO eligibility from 14 to 16. So currently, 14, 15, 16, and 17-year-olds can be charged as a YO, and we think that that should only be 16 and 17-year-olds. Second, I just want to recognize that while we did research on this and presented data that is, we think, compelling, we think there's really important that further research be conducted and look at cases of white youth who are not indicted as youthful offenders, despite being charged with crimes and having records that could subject them to a youthful offender charge, as well as on the impact of race on sentencing practices for YO. Now, to be clear, we do not advocate for an increase in the use of YO charges against white youth who are not currently being charged, just the opposite. But we think the research in this area can help show some of the driving factors within the system of what is driving the racial disparities. We also recommend that pre-arraignment youth diversion programs remain an outcome for young people who are charged with carrying a firearm under MGL 269-10A. And finally, get back to it. This is a recommendation that's both towards the juvenile court and also towards the legislature. We don't have specific language towards the legislature, but we think it's really important and recommend strongly that youth who are indicted as YOs, that they receive reasonable and developmentally appropriate dispositions and sentences. And we really we raise real caution against the use of suspended sentences and direct adult sentences that are equal to the maximum sentences that an adult would receive in superior court. In a number of cases that in speaking to attorneys and speaking to young people, we've heard stories where if a similarly situated 18-year-old were charged in superior court, they would not have received nearly the length of sentence that the youthful offender that the young person received as a YO in juvenile court. And we really think that that is not in line with the interests and overall nature of the juvenile court. So before passing this on to a couple of people who have more experience specifically in representing, and as one person who was himself charged as a YO, I just want to encourage everyone to check out the full report at cfjj.org/publications, and also to, if you are not already following us on social media and our JJ News, to check us out there. Thank you so much for coming today, and look forward to chiming back in for questions and answers.
Thank you so much, Josh, for setting forth that data, which really does reflect the clear picture that we're talking about practices here that are overall out of alignment with what's developmentally appropriate for young people, but also on those disparities. And just before moving on, thinking about 3.2, that finding, the fact that when it comes to straight adult sentences, state prison sentences, the most serious penalty in our juvenile system, the fact that that was exclusively imposed on non-white youth. Not one single white child in the Commonwealth received that sentence, which is the heaviest and starkest in our system, reflects not only disparities, but disparities with the utmost harm being exclusively driven towards young people of color. But as we think about what that harm means, it's important to always center and elevate the voices of those who are directly impacted. And to that end, I'd like to introduce Javon, who is a member of the Transformational Prison Project, an organization founded behind the wall in 2013 that focuses on healing, both for those who are charged and impacted by crime. Javon will talk about his experience as a young person at 15 years of age, being charged as YO, and the impact it has had on his life. So please welcome Javon. Thank you so much for being with us. I'll turn the floor over to you.
Thank you guys. It's a pleasure definitely being here, especially just getting the chance to share my story. As he said, my name's Javon. I'm from Brockton, Massachusetts. Grew up in the inner city. I grew up in a lovely Cape Verdean household. Very family orientated. Grew up in the streets, just being a young kid into not really into violence, but more like the drug culture, inner city stuff, fast money making, and just being caught up as a kid. One time I was 15 years old. My friend and I, we decided to rob this man at gunpoint, and the man that we robbed, he ended up being an undercover cop. It was a drug deal that ended up turning into a robbery. And off us robbing that man at gunpoint, I was charged as a youthful offender. I was held without bail. I sat for about 6 months, and I pled guilty. And when I pled guilty to committed to DYS, which I would serve 12 to 18 or 12 to 24 months in DYS, and then come home with probation. But the weird thing about my sentencing is that my lawyer told me that I was going to obviously go to DYS for the 12 to 24 months, but then I would have a suspended sentence. And he was explaining to me what basically this is suspended sentence. Excuse me for speaking too fast. Sometimes I do that. But basically, he explained to me that the suspended sentence would be open until I was 24 years old, I believe he said. So 21 to 24, that basically once I get out of DYS, that I do have probation, but I'm never gonna have to check in on probation because I have a DYS caseworker, and my DYS caseworker reports to my probation officer. And once when I get out off probation, done dealing with my caseworker at 21, that I'll get transferred to superior court probation. Me being young, I'm like, that sounds crazy, but all right, whatever, we'll do that. 2 weeks later, we go in for sentencing, And when he told me, completely did not happen. I was like, the judge ended up giving me an 8 to 15 year sentence for what's it called, for a suspended sentence. And I'm trying to talk to my lawyer. I'm like, yo, I thought you said it was only 3 years for the suspended sentence. He's like, "Nah, I don't know what's going on at the time." And just like I said, me being so young and uneducated, I didn't know what was going on. So I had no choice but to take it. So I ended up serving about 18 months in DYS. I was released in 2012. I was only out for about 9 months, and then I violated my probation. I violated my probation once of one offense for driving without a license, which was dismissed, and another offense for hearsay, where me and my aunt we got into an argument, and she told my probation officer, well, my caseworker, that like she seen me flash a gun, but she doesn't know if it was a real gun, fake gun, or whatever the case might be. So I was pulled back into DYS. I said probation violated me. I went to a probation hearing, and at my probation hearing, my aunt came on to stand and everything and told him, like, no, I'm not trying to get him in trouble or anything. It's like this, I don't even think it was a real gun. It could have been a BB gun, anything. I don't even know what a real gun looks like. Like this, my probation officer didn't want to violate me. He just wanted to give me an ankle bracelet. Same thing as my DYS caseworker. Even the DA, no one wanted to violate me. But the judges ended up violating me, and he gave me an 8 to 15 year sentence at the age of 17. And I never even been to Superior Court or nothing. Like, I tell everyone the one thing about me, I own up to all my mistakes in life. What I did was wrong. I fully take ownership to what I did, even though I was a child. It wasn't right. But at the end of the day, I know I put someone's life at harm, which isn't right. You weren't supposed to do that to anybody. But in my case, I feel like was justice like really served. I was 15 years old when it happened. Like this, I didn't even catch a real violation. It wasn't like I violated probation for another drug charge or gun charge or something. Just off a hearsay, they gave me an 8 to 15 year sentence, and I would have ended up serving 9 years. I've been home for about 2.5 years now, but I'm still on parole, which I don't have an issue with my parole officer because I don't get in trouble, you know. So I go to school, said I'm involved in a few other different programs, and I work out a whole bunch of good things going on. But it's like sometimes like, damn, I want to leave the country. I can't even leave the country, go see my family, nothing because of parole. Like, damn, man, it's like, where does this work? Like, I was a child when it happened. Like, yes, I grew up in the system. I learned my rights from wrong. It definitely elevated me. The prison system, I mean, that time definitely made me a better person. Just being around lifers and being able to do restorative justice, just to have understanding of myself, knowledge of myself, and just working with trauma and healing. It just opened up a light to me. But at the same time, like, I seen people going in at 18, 19, like you guys were talking about 18, 19, 20 years old. I got cases similar to mine, might even be worse, even though I don't judge no one's cases because it's none of my business, but getting less more sentences or going home and coming back and still getting less more time. And I'm over here trying to fight the case. And my family hired me a lawyer to appeal it, lost the appeal, went for a sentence reduction. And I'm like, damn, man, like, understand, yeah, it was law enforcement. I get that. I didn't know that. I wasn't trying to harm the guy. Like, even in my police report, we didn't even have no bullets in the gun. They were just a kid just trying to find a way to make money. It just was it a wrong choice? Absolutely. It was all the way, but an 8 to 15 year sentence. And prime example, my co-defendant, he was 17 at the time, and he got charged as an adult. And he being charged as an adult, he ended up taking a 6 to 8 sentence. And I ended up serving an 8 to 15 year sentence. It's just like, and I've seen it happen to multiple people from other kids I grew up in Brockton, or just kids I know that I was committed with from Taunton, New Bedford, Fall River, the Bristol County. Like this, I see happen all the time. The kids will get these crazy, outrageous suspended sentence with 7 years, 8 to 10, 8 to 12. Like this outrageous, like even mine, 8 to 15. Like that's a 7 year gap. It doesn't even like, it doesn't make sense, bro. Like, what was you thinking? Like, what was the judge really thinking? And like I said, the judge, like the DA wasn't even the issue in my case. Lawyer is just like, I feel like the judge took a personal with me just because it was law enforcement. Like I said, I know it was wrong, but 8 to 15 years. I served literally 10 and a half years off something I did at 15 years old. Did 18 months straight in DYS. And then I was in state prison for 9 years. Off of one bad choice. I mean, I accept all my consequences, my actions. No, it is what it is. Made me a better person. But I mean, justice shows, man, you got kids, man, that don't mean to do things. Some you're young, that's when the whole brain development comes into play. It's like you don't treat the kids in the system the way they're supposed to be treated. And then not even that. And then even kids fighting cases, you give them these high bills, $100,000 bill, $50,000 bills where their family can't even afford to put up the bill or anything. And it's like so much stipulations. And then never mind, if you're waiting pre-trial for if you're a juvenile, you don't even get that time. Once when you cop out, if you sat a year, 2 years, 3 years, whatever dead time is, you don't get none of that. And that's not right neither, man. Just like the juvenile system alone, the way it is, it's not balanced, right? I feel like you said, the juvenile predator, I feel like that still goes on, and I see it happen. Like even right now with TTP, I'm in DYS part times, running circles, just building with the kids, and you see it, these kids just getting smoked, man, just off of mistakes. Like, yo, sometimes you can't, we don't ask where we grew up sometimes. Life, it is what it is, bro. We don't come from the greatest. Not everyone was privileged or blessed. Sometimes we go up in the city, man, especially nowadays, you got rap music, you got social media, you got all this stuff that's entertaining that kids think that are cool and not knowing any better. So sometimes they fall victim to stuff and make a bad choice. And that one bad mistake, the system doesn't understand the influences that's around them or just the whole brain development process and just frying guys. Like it doesn't even make sense. Like me, 8 to 15 years, all I did for a robbery, I seen guys get manslaughter, get 10 to 12s. Like, damn, man, like, bro, does it make sense? And like this pattern has to be stopped. That has to be broken. Like this cycle isn't right. And if the system, like, thankful for you guys that are fighting for this, you guys are putting in work, and I appreciate you guys, especially just being here with you guys. But it's organizations like this that could come to cause an end to this nonsense, because it's not right, man. You just don't give a kid, stopping kid 10, take 10, take 15, 5, 7, and not even that. The effect that it also puts on the family too. Like you put effects on people's families. So that was traumatizing. Like this, like my mother having to go see me in a state prison, me at 17 years old with a 15-year sentence, when they know that there's other people, especially you grow up in the inner city, there's people that get locked up at 18, 19 for similar things and don't get the same amount of time. It just doesn't add up, man. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to talk somebody. One thing about that, I could talk about that all day, like I told you. And then like I shared with you guys earlier, in Norfolk, when I went upstate at 17, it was me and another kid. We was the last two to go upstate at 17 in 2013. I was in population in Norfolk for about like 6, 7 weeks. And that's when the Alabama law changed, saying you can't be 17 in the state prison no more. And they changed, they had to drop the first degrees to seconds. They took me out of population and gave me my own unit in Norfolk, an MC at Norfolk. Me and my boy Shish, we were the only two 17-year-olds there. For 90 days, I had my own unit. They segregated us. We couldn't see no one in the camp. We had our own yard time. We had our own gym time. And I don't even think we was even supposed to still be in state prison at the time, because I'm pretty sure the law said you can't be 17 in a state facility. And we was still 17 in this facility. And not even that, we got tortured because of that. We got punished because of that. Like, we was pretty much locked down. We couldn't do nothing. We're in a unit all day long, just me and him with a TV. We can't even go out much. And if we do go out, we only had the yard for what, 45 minutes, and then the gym for like an hour. I say, yo, that's really traumatizing, putting that battle on someone. It's like, I feel like I was being punished. Like, yo, I'm already being punished with a lot of time. But now I'm being overly punished because of my age, just because I realistically wasn't supposed to be here or be doing this amount of time. Now I'm being even more punished, and it's just a lot with it, man. It's just so much things that happen throughout the time, man. But yo, I'm thankful for you guys, man, because I believe in you guys, man. I have a feeling that you guys will definitely make a change.
Thank you so much. And again, no, you owe no apologies, Javon. Like, thank you so much for being with us today. Thank you for the courage to open up and tell your story, because this is so much more than just data. This is about, as you so eloquently stated, the ongoing impact into adulthood on you, on your family, for an act you committed. You were still a child. And I think our decision makers really need to take into account what it really means when young people, when kids are subjected to this type of treatment. And you've, so amazingly done that today. Thank you so much again for sharing your time.
I appreciate you guys a lot.
No, absolutely. So now we're going to move on to our next guest, whom we're so honored to have with us. Um, it's important to hear directly from those impacted, but it's also important to get a lens into the courtroom and what it means to be able to handle these cases where the stakes, as Javon so perfectly stated, are so high. And for that, we bring in attorney Dana Sargent. Attorney Sargent's been in private practice for 25 years, concentrating primarily on criminal defense of adults and juveniles in our legal system. He has accepted CPCS cases as a part of the Bristol County Bar Advocate Program for most of his career, and he's currently CPCS certified to handle cases in the district court, juvenile court. He's on the youthful offender list, as well as the superior court and murder list. He has over 50 jury trials throughout the courts in Massachusetts, including 5 murder trials and a mix of superior court felony jury trials, district court trials, and juvenile court trials. Attorney Sargent also mentors other attorneys as well and brings a wealth of experience both in the juvenile system and in the adult system, and can expertly speak to the imposition of these sentences under the youthful offender statute and how these cases unfold. So with that, thank you again, Attorney Sargent, for being with us, and I hand over the floor to you.
Can't hear you.
You're on mute. Oh, by the host. Okay, hold on. Try now.
There we go. That's better. Okay, sorry about that. I mean, the host had me muted. I'm not sure how that happened. I guess sometimes us lawyers need that, right? One of the things that has always bothered me about the youthful offenders, and I have told the judges sentencing, the appeals court, the sentencing appeals, is that these kids get completely screwed just for being kids. So the biggest problem that the youth has when committing offense is that they weren't smart enough to be 18 when they committed it. Okay, so you have someone who's 18, 19 years old, charged first time, armed robbery, firearm, pick your crime. They're going to go into district court, where district court sees all the different charges that come in. They're most likely not getting indicted because they're newer to the system. And they may get a house of correction sentence of up to 2.5 years, maybe considerably left. Take the same kid, okay, indicted, 16 years old, maybe 17, maybe 15. They get indicted as a youthful offender because the district attorney's office doesn't want to release this kid from possible prosecution. And then they're treated so much more severely. And the adult sentences are horrible, but just as bad, in my view, are these combination sentences that we see all the time. And what they'll do is they'll take this same kid charged with, for instance, carrying a firearm, and they'll give him committed to DYS till the age of 21. Okay, wait a minute. I'm 16 now, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. So 5 years, I'm committed to DYS. I'll do 12 to 24 months, get released. That's already equal to an adult sentence of 18 months, okay? But this kid's now doing 2 years of DYS. And then the judge, in their infinite wisdom, will give them, 3 to 5 suspended to state prison or a straight suspended sentence. And they'll do it till they're 24, 25 years old. So this same juvenile who, had he been 18 when committing the offense, would have been released and back in society trying to figure things out, instead has now been accountable to DYS till 21, and then is in jeopardy of a brand new adult sentence. And Jovan talks about a horror of a situation he lived through where, 8 to 15 years was his sentence. And unfortunately, I've seen similar sentences that are similarly unfair. And when you take in context, a juvenile gets charged with a crime, and the kid is, say, 14, 15 years old. In context, those of us who are grandparents, your kids and your grandkids stop playing Little League Baseball at 13, okay? Little League Baseball. We're not even talking junior high school. They finish playing Little League Baseball. At 14, quite often they get linked up with an adult co-defendant and they do something dumb. They rob someone, they do something else. And the adult co-defendant almost always gets treated so much less severely. So now you take your same person who's charged with a crime. Let's say it's an unarmed robbery. Let's say it's an armed robbery with a firearm. Okay, armed robbery, firearm. For an adult, when they're indicted, it's going to be a 5-year mandatory minimum sentence. Okay, if indicted and charged under that. Most of the time, when a case gets indicted to Superior Court, unless there's specifically egregious facts on it, the prosecutor and defense lawyer are going to negotiate a reduction. They're going to get away from that 5-year mandatory minimum. And maybe the adult now, 18, 19, pleads to 3 to 5, 4 to 5, 4 to 6, but they plead to a number, okay? And maybe a term of probation, which may be a year or two. Never, ever in my practice have I seen the amount of probation that these YO kids get, okay? Except in a very serious rape of a child case having to do with adult rapists on child victims. Then someone gets a 10-year sentence. In juvenile court, they're handing out sentences of DYS committed till 21 with probation till 25. You look at that, that's 5 years of DYS commitment and parole, 5 years of probation for a child. 1, 2, 3 years removed from Little League baseball. And the district attorney's office chooses to indict these youths, and they choose to indict them because they're afraid they're going to lose jurisdiction over them because they're going to age out and no longer be accountable to the juvenile system. This business of combination sentences needs to be tightened up and stopped altogether. I believe that your juvenile judges who do a lot right and try to do a lot right, unfortunately, don't always understand the gravity of offenses. And if you took the same 18-year-old kid in Superior Court, where the judge sees manslaughters, rapes, armed rob, people shot by guns with grievous injuries, they don't get these same 12 to 15 years suspended, 7 to 8 suspended, 8 to 12, 8 to 15. These numbers are real numbers when a kid violates it. And your adult co-defendants don't get it, but the juveniles do. And this has been argued in court, in sentencing, repeatedly. It's been argued on sentencing appeals. I've done it for juveniles. I believe Javon did it on his, to argue, why is he treated so much more severely for committing a crime at 15, 16 years old than an adult co-defendant? And none of the courts seem to be offering relief on this. And I'm hoping the legislature will. And the point being is the law does say your juvenile should not be treated more severely than adult co-defendant. How is that not the case if you take any of these YOs where a juvenile is charged with what in juvenile court are your more serious offenses? Anything other than murder, but with an assault and battery with a dangerous weapon, a firearm offense, or an armed robbery. Sometimes they're shootings, sometimes they're rapes. But the degree of prosecution that falls upon these juveniles, and then with an adult case, they get probation compliance credits. And an adult sentence quite often gets reduced substantially from their probation sentence based on compliance. There's been studies, anything more than 2 to 3 years on probation is something that is more punitive than beneficial, and it sets them up for failure. Kids are routinely getting put on probation until 24, 25 on YOs, routinely. So if the kid is 15, 16, when charged, how is that child supposed to make it 10 years on probation? Meanwhile, they got to go to DYS, and they're going to learn to essentially be an inmate at DYS, make the connections there, try to then get out onto the street. And when I mean the street, I mean the workforce, not the street. And they're trying to get jobs, they're trying to get educations, and trying to stay out of the limelight. Meanwhile, they are previously committed youths, and often the police know who they are. And it takes a violation of probation to trigger the most extreme consequences. Can you imagine driving with a suspended license and allegedly showing an item to your aunt gets you 8 to 15, right? That's really the world we're in right now when you're indicted as a YO. Now, an adult co-defendant on a similar case, they're going to be, so the driving violation goes away. It's the probation that hooked him, okay? And then the hearsay with the aunt, that all goes away at trial. I suggest to you, most of your Superior Court judges, they see more serious cases. A juvenile court judge who's used to dealing with care and protection cases, CRAs, child in need of service, go to school, get out the pom-poms, right? Or they're dealing with, smaller delinquency cases. They see a robbery come in with a firearm involving an officer. Oh my God, this is the worst case I've ever seen. And the perspective isn't there of what the true cases that go through the Superior Court system. When you see murders, you see rapes, you see serious bodily injuries, stabbings, shootings, and cases, Javon is right. I've had manslaughter cases I pled out for 8 for 12 years, okay? You got a dead guy, beat over the head with a shovel, shot, stabbed, who got 8 to 12. To think that you can get 8 to 12 for, a robbery gone bad when you're a couple of years removed from the age to play Little League baseball. There's something patently wrong with the statute, and more so than that, the enforcement of the statute, and why it is they're choosing, Black and Latino youth to be punished under this and not the white youth. Well, that's a whole nother issue that needs to be looked at. But the tool itself, the YO, the combination sentences, the ability to give an adult sentence, or I say even worse than an adult sentence, a combination sentence. First, lock him up at DYS till 21. Then let him out and see if he can survive till 25. Good luck with that, right? There's something patently wrong with the statute. I hope the legislature will, in fact, change it. I know you guys are pushing to change it. I wish the judges would take a separate look. I wish every juvenile court judge would spend some time in Superior Court and listen to your rape of a child, rape of a retarded child, stabbing, shooting, mayhem, the different terrible, terrible offenses, the broken bones in the woman's face when she's beaten viciously, by the now ex-boyfriend. And then when they think, boy, well, that guy was a real monster. He got a 4 to 6. Then how do you give someone like Javon an 8 to 12 or an 8 to 15 suspended? Like it's some fictitious number. Well, guess what? When it's time to serve that number, that's a lifetime. That's an absolute lifetime for a juvenile to be faced with those kinds of numbers. And only in YOs, that's the only place you see it. You get a better shot in a murder trial than you do in a YO case. That's Massachusetts for you, folks.
That's true.
Thank you so much, Attorney Sargent. And again, it's so important that everyone really understand the inner workings of the court system. There's a lot of rhetoric that gets thrown around. We see it in the papers, we hear the conversation, but on the ground floor in court, it's important for folks to be able to see how things really work, and you provided that for us so expertly today. Thank you. At this point, we have 10 minutes to go, and I want to open things up for questions. Feel free to use the reactions to raise your hand or to simply drop a question in the chat for any questions you may have for Josh, Javon, or for Attorney Sargent.
I have a question.
Go
Hi. So I think this is fantastic. So I'm just curious. So what's the next step in terms of bringing, like, I think, to some degree, you're talking to the choir here. How are you guys going to put this out to people like the legislature and like people who don't work in juvenile court that don't, they kind of have these gut reactions? I really think both Dana and the other young man, I'm sorry, Javon, really spoke very well to it. But I would like to see that with people, who don't know how it is. You know what I mean? I'm just curious about like, how's it going to, what's the next step?
Josh, you want to take that one?
Sure. Thanks so much for the question. Right now, the CfJJ is working with the Juvenile Justice Coalition, a coalition of 60 plus organizations to think about and plan for legislative priorities for the coming session. There's not currently, as far as I know, a draft bill on this question, but I'd say we would share these findings and share the report and hopefully work with a legislator or a legislator on both the House and Senate side to sponsor legislation of this that follows this. But you're right that this is a challenging issue when legislators, there are not, the numbers are pretty small. And so there are not a lot of, this is not an issue that gets a great deal of attention. And so it's a bit of an uphill battle just to sort of educate folks on the existence of the YO statute and then to talk about why it's so important for it to change. But that is broadly how we work, and we will need support from a broad range of people to get something passed in legislature.
Thank you, Josh.
Thank you.
A small number, but major impacts. Really quickly, a couple comments from the chat, then I will go to Kathleen. Andrew writes, the judges need to see this. We understand the issue, but I don't believe judges understand what they do with sentencing. Thank you for your comment, Andrew. And a comment, I'll direct this to you, Josh, from Grace. I may have missed this on the GRASP reporting trial data, but I did not see anything for Worcester County. Is that information readily available?
Yeah, we didn't highlight Worcester, but the data is there in the report that Worcester, the YOs are used some in Worcester. We didn't highlight it because the numbers weren't the highest level in terms of being really out of whack in terms of by population. But the data is there, and feel free to reach out. I'm happy to discuss something if there's something to talk about in terms of issues in specific counties.
Wonderful. Kathleen, you have a question?
Yeah, it kind of goes with the juvenile courts and the JPAD. Are there any trainings that can be done in this, required trainings for the judges since it's a new head of the juvenile court? And I just say this because when we had that audit that we did and found that they weren't tracking the shackling in the courts, and the last person put in coding. If there's a willingness with the new juvenile court justice person to have this robust conversation and have training for the judges, required training, not optional, but required. Is that something that's doable? Is that something that, that report we did around the shackling, and also I think it's a similar issue with GPS, not tracking GPS assignments either. It's all paper-based. So I'm just curious if there's been any receptiveness to the new changing of the guard at the juvenile courts. Just curious for, just to know on our end.
Yeah. We've reached out to them generally, but we have not engaged on this specific issue, but we certainly look forward to that conversation. I think the judges play a really important role in this in terms of their reactions to suggested sentences, and then, of course, their sentencing decisions specifically, and their openness to diversion across the board, right? For not just YO cases, but their sort of the impacts, the longer term impacts of those different diversion decisions. So I'm not one who has the authority to say that they should have mandatory training on issues, but there is certainly, I'd say that the practice does look different in different places in the Commonwealth, and sometimes that's concerning for sure.
Quickly, one in the chat, and then I will get to Rebecca. Pauline asked about the possibility of training through the Flashner Institute. And for those who are not aware of the Flashner Judicial Institute, they seek to meet the educational needs of both new and experienced judges. So wanted to float that to you, Josh, before we move to the next question.
Look, I think you're right to note that this is an inflection point for the juvenile court, and we look forward to engaging with them on this question. And great to note other areas for judicial training.
Thank you, Rebecca. Oop, you're on mute, Rebecca.
Okay, so this is really important work, and I credit CfJJ again for, this is beautiful work. This is really well done, and it's so clear, and so it makes a really compelling case, and so that's a credit to CfJJ. I have sort of a two-part question, actually. One is that when CfJJ proposes this, and gets a legislator to support it, I guess is really what you're going to have to do. How will this be seen running alongside CfJJ's Raise the Age issue? I'm interested in how those two might interact together before the legislature. And then secondly, I guess, sort of anticipating, and maybe it's too soon for that, but where do you expect the greatest opposition within the legislature to making a change in this?
Can I defer to Leon and Senna on these questions? These are very, very pertinent questions.
Yeah, so I'll quickly say the following. If you note our recommendation does not call for the full abolition of the youthful offender statute, understanding that there are some very serious, egregious, but it does seek to place limitations on the youthful offender statute, especially with respect to certain kinds of cases that we're seeing result in highly disproportionate sentences like the one Javon. So in many ways, that approach to right sizing to limit some of those harms, looking at a world post raise the age, if it were to happen, you have a framework for for serious offenses, but right now, the overly broad nature of the criteria is leading to far too many young people being in a situation like Javon, and we believe that there's room to address that. So I would simply say that, but I leave the Senate to jump in if you have any other perspectives.
So the legislature right now, we basically have to talk to our allies in the state house about where they think this would be. The legislature is a challenge with being more lenient with kids with low-level offenses. So we're not going to be able to get anything unless we have champions, and that's going to be the main thing. Probably after the election, because that's where everybody's brains are. But November 6th, we are going to be talking about our legislative strategy and how much of this can be administrative. I love all the ideas of the judicial training and external, like administrative advocacy, as well as legislative as just one tool.
And before we move on, I'd simply add that everyone here has a state representative and a state senator who represents their interests, and that this report was especially moving for you. We encourage you to share it far and wide to everyone in your circle, but I do believe part of cultivating potential champions for change is making sure that our elected officials have this type of information and that they hear the kind of stories that you've heard from Javon and Attorney Sargent as well. So maybe time for one more question, if any. I don't want to cut anyone off.
I'll just note there was a question in the chat about if there were any in-state within Massachusetts counties that do have diversion for weapons offenses. I replied in the chat, but we looked specifically outside of Massachusetts with some suggestions from Kings County and also Brooklyn and in Minneapolis. And I'd say I don't have any recent data on diversion in Massachusetts, specifically around weapons offenses. But if others know, I mean, my understanding is in a prior iteration that Suffolk County had some cases that were diverted even for carrying. And we've heard, I'd say, different stories or different conflicting stories from Middlesex. Some people say, yes, that happens in Middlesex, but then we quoted in the report, their policy is not that.
And thank you for mentioning that, Josh, because oftentimes when change is proposed, a knee-jerk reaction is, well, that couldn't work here. Well, not far from here in Brooklyn, New York, that type of diversion has been implemented and is shown to be effective. So it is something where with the political will and courage can happen and can be effective both at improving outcomes for young people while also improving public safety as well. But with that, we are now at 2:02. I want to be respectful of everyone's time. Thank you all so much for joining us this afternoon. Another thank you to Josh, to Jovan, and to Attorney Sargent for sharing your amazing perspectives. Again, please go to our website at cfjj.org/publications. The report is live. And again, please feel free by email, by social media. Please feel free to share this information if you are so moved to far and wide. But thank you so much for being with us, and we'll see you another time. Take care.
Thank you. Take care.